Welcome to my Just Jenny podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Will Cole. You know him, of course, because he's a leading functional medicine expert, and he specializes in clinically investigating underlying factors of chronic disease. He's authored 4 books. He's here for his 4th book, Gut Feelings, Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. First of all, welcome to my podcast. Hi. Hi, Will.
Hey,
I'm going to call you Will because we
yeah,
know each other
yeah,
since the first book, I feel like.
exactly. No, it's been
Yeah.
years. It's been years, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing well. How about yourself? How are you doing?
I'm okay. I know, and a lot of people have been talking about a recent interview you did with Gwyneth Paltrow because, of course, you are part of the Goop podcast world and close to her. And I watched that and listened to it, and I was like, this is a whole big bag of bullshit. Because I don't know, drinking bone broth or drinking broth in general for lunch some days to me is completely fine and normal. I had zero, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that just sounds like Tuesday um, to someone like to me or you. But what I've really been thinking about is how your new book, Gut Feelings, this healing the shame fueled relationship between what you eat and how you feel, is how this came out at a time in your life where you've just suffered an incredible loss, um, which is incredibly traumatic. So I want to start with sort of taking a moment to talk about that you did just lose your father suddenly,
Hmm.
um, and how that has impacted this whole now for you, this book launch,
Hmm.
this very conversation of the tie between our gut health, our brain health, our physiology when we've experienced trauma, loss,
Hmm.
emotions.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Uh, it's been a lot. It's definitely
Mm-hmm.
been a lot. And the last time I talked to him was weeks before the book came out. I mean, he's been gone a month at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw him probably a week or so before he passed away suddenly. It was in a car accident. And he was so excited about the book coming out. We were talking about all the things we're gonna do. And it just so, I mean, it's never easy to lose anybody for any of us, right? But it's definitely different when there's no time to say goodbye and it's sudden, right? And I've never had to go through this. I never lost a parent before, so all of this is completely new territory for me. And I never thought that would happen to me at this point. He was vibrant and
Yeah.
youngish, like he was like there's no it just really puts things in priority. So I think you mentioned like the controversy and the viral nature of like the conversation on my podcast with Gwyneth, like all of that. I had some spiritual, emotional antibodies through that.
Well, that's
So
what
it's
I'm
like,
saying. So as I watched it, exactly that. I
yeah,
was like, he doesn't give a crap. I
I
don't
don't
care
give a
about
crap.
this. Like, he's got to just get on with his goddamn day. Like,
Yeah,
go away. Like, grow up, people. Like, this is
yeah.
the dumbest. All of it was dumb. And I was actually thinking to myself, like, everybody, I guess, because I lost my dad in November, I lost my mom almost 15 years ago.
Sorry.
And one of the things about grief, and I think I had messaged you just because I'm like a grief expert at this point, is the world keeps going and turning. And you're in this spot of like, but my dad is gone. Like, you're all consumed with the fact that Gwyneth has a drink at lunchtime, as in a broth. My dad died. Like, you're focusing on the wrong thing,
Yeah.
essentially. Not that you want people focusing on your loss, but we're so skewed. And I think this is part of what's important about gut feelings is that we're so paying attention to all the wrong things
Yeah.
as
It's so much
opposed,
of
yeah.
so much of our world. It's distraction and numbing, and it's the dopamine hit we get from saying something horrible on social media. And it's like I recently talked about the research of the virality of a post
Yeah, I
and
saw
how
that.
things that get viral become viral. They
Hmm.
typically elicit things that make people angry and raged, and all of this is based off of clips, not context. And it's just unfortunate state of our culture, which is just, this is one of many examples of that. So yeah, I just going through it actually, when you have a very clear reminder of what's actually important in life and at the end of our life, we're not going to think about the dumb viral posts on TikTok. We're going to remember
Correct.
what is the legacy that we leave? How do we treat the people in our life that we know and don't know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's truly what, how I kind of was processing all of this, is that
Yeah.
the, and it's what I talk about in the book. You know, it's
Yeah.
really, all of this to me was like a moment for me to say, this is when I'm going to practice the things that I talked about in the book. How do I
Yes.
create stillness? How do I create,
Yes.
regulate my nervous system and take care of my soul, instead of get caught up in this, FOMO culture and this
Ugh.
sort of toxic tribalism on social
Yeah.
media. It's so
Yeah.
unhealthy for our health.
Yeah. And it actually, I've been watching you and watching some of the interviews and just, I'm not the biggest fan of that expression, like I'm holding space. It's annoying to me and it sounds rather woo woo, but I feel so much compassion for you and for what you're going through. And there's almost this like mirror impact that happens when you see someone else grieving and you're grieving. There's an understanding. It's shitty to lose your dad. It's shitty to lose your dad the way in which you did. And it's really hard to go on and be in rooms with people who maybe don't always get it, or it feels like they're poking around about
Mhm.
anything. And of
Mhm.
course, you don't have the ability right now to withstand bullshit because you're already sort of maxed out with your emotional life. So it cuts the fat, right? Like it
Mhm.
trims the fat of
Mhm.
dealing. And yet you have to show up in this grief body. You have to show up in this grief body because you have this new fantastic book you need to be out talking
Mhm.
about, right? You have your
Yeah.
purpose and your message. But how are you specifically making sure that you take good care of yourself in the grief body? Because a grief body is very different from a body that's not in the midst of grief.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for reaching out, and just your years of support and friendship offline and online publicly. I do appreciate it. And it's this weird club that I found myself in that I didn't
Yeah.
realize was a club until I was
Ugh.
in it. That like people that have lost their parents, that's a club. And not just parents, but family members. I had a friend that
Just
recently reached
loss.
out, lost his brother like overnight
Oh,
from something. And it's like, yeah, there's this camaraderie that like, that it's actually beautiful bonding, I think, of people that are just get it, something that not everybody gets. So thank you. And I, if anything, I think it, for me, was I already had planned to kind of scale back, and my day job is running the telehealth clinic. I already planned not to do a formal like in-person book tour because
yeah.
I didn't want to take time away from patients anyways. And we're in telehealth, and I'm used to doing things virtually. So for me,
It's fine.
even before it happened to my dad, I had planned to do that. So it kind of was nice because I didn't have to cancel anything, and I love what I get to do, and I didn't have to travel much. I just mainly stayed here at the clinic, and
Yeah.
we did an Instagram live book tour instead of an actual book tour. We did a lot of podcasts, did a few TV things here and there, but primarily stayed here, which was really important because I had to be there for my family during this time, my mom specifically.
Man, you got to take care of yourself too, though. And this is so much of what you talk about in gut feelings. And I want to get into this because I like how you set up the book with kind of the information at the front, and then we get the recipes at the back. So it's like two books in one. But I want to talk about this shameflammation, this concept of how what we eat impacts how we feel, and how trauma and shame exacerbate inflammation in our
Mhm.
bodies. Because I know it's true, but I think it's twofold because I think it's what you're talking about with things like sugar, or for some people, gluten, or whatever might be the thing that isn't great for our digestion, depending on who we are. But in addition, I think there is a psychological component to how we feel when we eat things that we think aren't good for us, because that's
Mhm.
where there comes sort of a shame spiral will attach to
Mhm.
that. So get into that a little bit, the concept of shameflammation.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a made up word, but it's just my commentary on the research in the scientific
Yeah.
literature of how the mind body connection, and how
Yeah.
things like chronic stress and shame and things that cause shame, like unresolved trauma, how do these things influence our physiology, our
Hmm.
biochemistry, i.e.
Hmm.
inflammation. So that's what shameflammation really is. It's a phenomenon that I see in patients' labs a lot. People that eat very clean, that do all the right things, quote unquote, that you're supposed to do within wellness, but they're still still higher inflammation levels and
Hmm.
still having fatigue and hormonal issues and digestive problems. Well, why? Well, maybe it's things we have to optimize with their foods. Like maybe that just because it's quote unquote healthy doesn't necessarily mean it's right for them. There's a lot of examples of that. But or there may be something physiological. We deal with a lot of mold toxicity, like biotoxins, environmental toxins, which doesn't necessarily have anything directly to do with foods. Foods can impact it, but it is separate than food. But the feeling side of gut feelings, like the physiological and the psychological, that bidirectional relationship between mental health and physical health, the feeling side is a underlying like missing piece for many people. And the book is really about gut feelings, is about not just about what you're feeding your body, but what are you feeding your head and your heart, which is a lot more complex and nonlinear to unpack these very complex issues, where we have to look at things like what are the thoughts that we have about ourselves, what are the thoughts we have about food, or what's our relationship with our body, what's our relationship with food, and healing those relationships that are complex and muddy sometimes, but also unresolved trauma from our past. It's not always our current stressors, it's things that we have locked up in ourselves deep down that we don't even know are there, that's causing this dysregulation in the body. So that's really what gut feelings is about. And shameflammation is something that we need to take a look at, because many people are dealing with it and they don't even know that's what's keeping them stuck at this plateau when it comes to their health and why they feel the way that they do.
I mean, I know you're right. It sort of goes back to that concept of the body keeps the score,
Yeah.
or the concept of healing back pain from Dr. John Sarno, like this
Mm-hmm.
idea of our bodies retain stress and sadness and loss in the moment, from the today stuff to the yesteryear stuff. It lives in our cells. That's real. I mean, I don't need a cadaver cut open to show the trauma. I know that
Mm-hmm.
that's a real thing because I've experienced it. I've watched other people experience it. And there's even kind of the studies done on people who eat meals when they're feeling happy versus people who eat meals when they're feeling stressed. And the way the food's metabolized is totally different depending
Mm-hmm.
on the mood state of the person eating. So that right there is proof positive of how sort of our digestion is impacted by our emotional life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but how do we do the work to kind of get to the place where we can let go of some of that trauma, let go of some of that ish, is what my very scientific medical term ish. How do we let go of some of that ish that is living in our cells because of trauma we've been through?
Yeah, and I think that's why I put together the protocol in the book, because there's a gut tool and a feelings
Hmm.
tool for every day. So every
Yeah.
day they have an entry point of where they're at. So I'll just talk about it from that side. I want people to explore, what does the research show to be
Yeah.
very effective science-backed tools to support both the physiological and the psychological, because they both will influence each other. Like the healthier you get your gut, your second
Hmm.
brain, how it modulates the vagus nerve, which is the largest cranial nerve in the body that regulates our mood and our parasympathetic, this resting, digesting, hormone balanced state. Some people's entry point is more physiological. Like the more they nourish their gut. I talk about what's called a GAPS protocol, which is an acronym that we've used in functional medicine for a long time, but it stands for gut and psychology syndrome, the gut brain axis, or gut and physiology syndrome, like the gut immune, the gut inflammatory axis for people that have different autoimmune problems. So for some people, I think of the countless patients that are like, okay, the mental emotional stuff, like dealing with unresolved trauma head on, like you're talking about therapy or somatic practices, EMDR, the things I talk about on the feeling side in the book. Some people, they're not ready to go there. And for them, something more cut and dried, prescriptive, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, something they can just kind of wrap their minds around right now, is very doable. And they need to calm that inflammation in the body using nutrition, using the GAPS protocol, or something like that that's supportive of these mechanisms. And for other people, the food is completely overwhelming for them, and they would rather say, okay, I need to go to get EMDR practice, I need to
I
go see a
tried it.
therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. I tried the MDR. Just not, that's the rapid. Wait, it's at the eye
Yeah,
movement?
I'm
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
I
I just
movement.
tried it
Yeah.
and I couldn't do it. It was too much for me. And my therapist was like, I need you to think of a safe space. I need find, let's come up with your safe space. And I'm like, I can't, like, I don't have one. I, you have me think of a place where I could sit and feel like I don't have it. And she laughed. She was like, we'll try again next time.
And right, that's
Yeah.
totally true. For sometimes it's not that the
Yeah.
tool's not right for them. It may just be the timing's not right. Where it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
okay, they need to like cross that bridge at a certain point in their life or
Yeah.
start off lower and slower. So the point being, like, I realize when I'm writing a book, I'm meeting
Yeah.
so many different people at different points in their journey with
That's
different
right.
variables to consider. Obviously, from a clinical standpoint, I can develop protocols based on labs and knowing that person, and that's the science and art of what we do. But I want people to realize that there are tools, both from a physiological and a mental, emotional, spiritual side, that people can start to lean in and deal with these complex health issues. And no one needs to settle for this stuff. And they really can start to lean in, and the body's amazingly resilient. And depending on what your body's capable of doing. I mean, some people can move 50% in the right direction. Some people, that's 100% in the right direction. But I see people all the time up against seemingly insurmountable health issues overcome them when they start looking at these dark corners of what keeps us back.
And the nutrition component of this for people listening, I mean, food is medicine and can be used as medicine. When you can look at our nutritional breakdown and how nutrient dense the foods are that we're eating and how we're supporting our health and our guts, and see that we're not, because we're eating chips and potato chips and chocolate chips all day long. I mean, that's real. Sugar does something to our gut, and our gut is our second brain. It's a two-way conversation that the brain and the gut are having. So
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about this, how food really can be medicinal, and we're sort of missing the point that even if it's not a cure all for everything, it's for sure a cure much or cure many.
Mm-hmm.
And why not start eating in a way that's going to support our bodies?
Yeah, it's a fundamental tool, right? And it is a tool. It's not the only tool, like you said. And there's some people where food is massively influential on why they
Yeah.
feel the way they do. For some people, it's just supportive, right? It's not the major piece of the puzzle. So, and part of what I talk about in the book is that's the problem. What we have in so many ways, it's this toxic tribalism on all levels. It's this either or, like us versus them conversation, whether it's around healthcare or it's around food diet wars. It's like, find out what works for your body. And I think that so many people really fall through the cracks of this sort of reductive black or white conversation versus realizing things typically are complex, things typically exist on a spectrum. And
Yep.
just because it works for you doesn't necessarily mean it's applicable to everybody else. And so yeah, it's food is a massive influencer on our biochemistry. Every food we eat is influencing our biochemistry in some major ways, some in very negligible ways. But we have to realize it at least starts with the foods that we eat, and we need to look at breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a way to be supporting our health. And it's not about restriction; it's about how
Right.
can I nourish my body, and that's the paradigm shift that I have in the book. It's this third way of not toxic diet culture and not what I would say is equally toxic anti-diet culture, but like what's a middle evidence-based way to
Yeah.
say what works for my body and what doesn't. And let's have a logical conversation about clinical nutrition and how foods can really nourish you. And it is not about deprivation. This is just about using biochemistry to our advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to the ridiculousness of the viral stuff that went on with your The Art of Being Well podcast recently, because like of all the people and practitioners that I've talked to through the years, what drew me to you was that you were one of the first in the crazy day of keto to be like, yeah, you don't need to eat a lamb shank, a block of cheese, and some organ meats. Like,
Yeah.
you're good if you just want to eat like a little bit of fish and you want to eat nuts and seeds and berries and some spinach. Like, you were not telling me not to have vegetables. You were not telling me not to eat. And even when you had your fasting protocols, or you have your fasting protocols, you were never like, starve yourself. You're like, 14 hours, it's fine. 12 hours, it's fine. Like, you
Yeah.
were never somebody who was saying, go to extremes and
Mm-hmm.
you need to live like this in order
Mm-hmm.
to get to that. Like,
Yeah.
never. So
Yeah.
even the presumption that somehow that's the kind of doctor you are is so absurd to me that I'm like, wait, this is not the person that I know. There was heaps of food in your ketotarian. I forget, of course, the name of the
The
first, but I mean, when you have so many
inflammation
books.
spectrum. Yeah.
Yes.
Intuitive
Yeah,
fasting. Yeah. You're right.
that's right.
every single one of this, and thank you for that. I mean, someone that like actually knows my message and what
Oh
I
my
talk about.
God.
I mean, like
Yeah,
copious amounts of foods that I talk about. Well fed. Like all my patients are extremely
totally.
well fed and well
Yeah,
nourished. No one's starving. And
never.
it's like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. People run with things with just clickbait titles, and it just, they will run with things that are completely just lies, flat out lies.
Correct.
And it's unfortunate, and you can't really like try to rationalize something that's or someone that's committed to misunderstanding you. And you really can try, you might drive yourself crazy with trying to explain yourself, and
Mm,
because they're so deeply committed to their vitriol, and they're
they really are.
addicted to their dopamine
Yeah.
hit by pontificating something that's completely misinformed. So yeah, it didn't really bug me at all, because it was like, oh wow, this is almost, it's fun, it was
It was
humorous, because
funny.
it's just
I
to see
agree with you.
how twisted people can
Yes.
have. And it's just like, she
Yeah.
gets it all the time, and Gwyneth gets it all the time. I see people for a
Don't.
living.
Right.
I'm not used to that. But again, I had these sort of emotional antibodies that I think even from the last book that I and going through when I went through with my dad, that I just, all
Yeah.
of it was like peripheral noise and not really serious. And the people that got the message and actually read the book know my message. And it's really lots of delicious foods and not about restriction. And, all of this is predicated on a clip. And,
Yeah.
being in this business, like there is like a 5-second clip that's like, these are some of the things we talked about. Listen to the
Yeah.
hour-long conversation.
I
And then they
know.
just ran with this clip as if
Yeah.
that was the entire conversation.
But even that clip, I mean, I've been on, and I've said this on air multiple times with different people. I've said on this podcast that there's nothing wrong with some days having broth for lunch. Who
Right.
cares? Like, I don't, I,
Yeah.
I'm, if I'm a movie star, let's just say I am, and my body is part of my business, let's just say it is, then so what? If some days I want to have soup for
Yeah.
lunch, like it's the most ridiculous. Like I'm giddy on a day where I'm done eating at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like if my husband has to go out to dinner and I could finish my day at 4 o'clock, I'm so happy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to feel so good in the morning. I like that feeling of a reset of my digestion. That makes me happy. It doesn't make me disordered. It makes me happy. And
Yeah.
knowing my body is a really good thing. And that
Yeah.
clip was just so taken out of, like, on every level, it was out of proportion
Mhm.
because it's truthful. Like I actually would rather hear that said and hear Gwyneth say I have bone broth some days for lunch than hear her lie and say she's eating cheeseburgers and French fries 7 days a week.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about this too. It's completely hypothetical, but I was wondering, okay, what if somebody said, what if she said, I had fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
That's what I mean. Right.
People would maybe laugh, but people would not be in an uproar. But you look at what we're facing as a society. Like we have the most chronic disease. It's
Yeah.
largely lifestyle driven by the foods we eat. But yet America's not really up in arms about the chronic disease that they're
No.
feeding themselves. And I
No.
think that's the disordered thing, is really like
Yeah.
someone can't even choose to eat vegetables, meat, and broth. Like that's radical, and that's disordered. But yet feeding chronic health problems is normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you have to just scream from the rafters in a sense that, like, not everything is diet culture. It's
yeah,
just not. Like,
right.
lifestyle's lifestyle. Choosing to care for your body in a way that you know is right for your body is taking care of yourself. That's it.
Yeah, I know. And it's people like, it's all about like, we want people to like live their own life and do their own thing and pro agency and pro choice, except when somebody makes a choice that they don't like.
Exactly.
And then it's like,
Exactly. And then it's like,
you're a
what?
horrible human being. Wait,
Horrible, horrible human.
I thought we were all supposed to be tolerant. And it's not
Mm,
true tolerance to only tolerate things you agree with.
that's right. That's right. No, it's not.
It's
And
just
there's
virtue
nothing.
signaling.
And by the way, at the very core of what she said, there's nothing dangerous.
No.
There's nothing. There was nothing dangerous. Nothing. Anyway. I'm going to get off the soapbox. Okay, let's talk about the meals as medicine and meditation. Let's talk about the recipes, what sort of your philosophy is on what we should be including in our food plans each day, and what you think we should limit based on how it impacts our overall physiology.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want people, as I say in the book, I want people to get away from this list of do's or don'ts, but really eat whatever you want, but use meals as a meditation, because I really want this aha moment for people, for them,
Mhm.
for themselves. That way it's not me pontificating and saying that's bad and that's good, because you're not a bad person if you choose like to eat something that doesn't love you back. But it's just, it's not a moral failure. I want to just use it as an inquisitive mindfulness experiment, like using your breakfast, lunch, and dinner as a meditation and your snacks as a meditation, because I find this to be a point of freedom and conscious awareness for my patients, because then they can go and take that food, eat
Mhm.
it mindfully. They're not, as a general rule, they're not doing it stressed. They're sitting down, they're chewing mindfully, and they can kind of see, how does this meal make me feel? And they may feel, oh man, like this made me feel great, wonderful. And we teach them the things that are most likely to love them back. There's a lot of bioindividuality with this, but different proteins, fats, carbs, like just eating nourishing, nutrient dense, bioavailable, yummy food. But they may have a food that maybe they're out with their friends and they're eating, and they may feel, oh man, this food didn't really make me feel good. Now, using this as a meditation, they may find, oh, but the socialization, hanging out with my family and friends was worth it. That was like a good trade-off for them. And they'll remember that for next time. Maybe they'll have a little bit less of it because they're doing it more mindfully. Or they may find out, no, what, this bloating, this X symptom, whatever it
Not worth
is,
it. Yeah.
it wasn't worth it. So there's that, what I call in the book, food piece, that I want people to find for themselves. Then it's not people on social media or a doctor or anybody else telling them like, this is the path. Because if I hung my hat on one way for everybody, I'd be proven wrong all day long. So I want people to really find this, like, what are the most effective tools within their toolbox, and then realize that toolbox and those tools will evolve over time. And it's okay to evolve. It's okay to learn new things. It's okay to pivot, and to realize that we're always changing and evolving on both a physiological level and a mental, emotional, spiritual level. So that's what I mean by me using your meals as a meditation and a medicine.
I will say that, like, you have a breakfast fried rice, it's actually rice. Like, this isn't a book that you're like, breakfast fried rice, and then it's only cauliflower.
We can use those too, right? I mean, like that. And there are people that look like the recipes. The book wasn't primarily a food book in the sense of, I was being less prescriptive in the book. I wanted people to have variety. I wanted people to have delicious foods. It's all gluten-free, because I deal a lot with people that have autoimmune conditions
Yeah.
clinically. So gluten doesn't work for a lot of those people. You can get better for you versions of gluten, like with sourdough bread or an ancient
Yeah.
grain. But for the sake of simplicity for the book, we did all gluten-free grains, but it's still grains. I think it's still
Yeah.
rice and corn and quinoa and all that stuff. So it is, and I realize there's going to be some things recipe wise, like there's 50 plus recipes in the book. So there's going to be some foods that some people they can't have. Like maybe some people it's like, I can't have nuts, or I can't have eggs, or I can't have nightshades. Okay, then pick the recipes that you can have. The book wasn't primarily to say, okay, this is for everybody food wise. I wanted people to just shift their perspective and their relationship with food in their body, and really deal with the feeling side of it all. Because sometimes I see this all the time. Food sensitivities go away whenever you deal with past trauma and chronic stress, and the space in
Yeah.
which you eat the meal and start to heal these mind body things. So, not everybody, but for many people, the severity and the frequency of these quote unquote foods and sensitivities can abate whenever you deal with these hypervigilant systems.
Because our bodies are so reactive, right? So the past trauma can get kicked up or triggered by whatever else. If you're living with a body that's on alert because it hasn't dealt with the trauma that it's experienced,
Mhm.
then that's how it's going to respond to anything put into it. Talk about the brain gut connection, because that's where it all sort of comes together. What we put in our gut and the way our gut processes things goes right up to our brain, and our brain goes right
Mhm.
down. So that's why it's got this whole interconnected
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely. Your gut and brain are formed from the same tissue when you're growing in your mother's womb. And they're linked through what's known as in the research as the gut brain axis, the connection between the gut and the brain. And the gut, even if you think about it, physically resembles the brain, but 95% of serotonin is made in the gut, 50% of dopamine is made in the gut. Now, these neurotransmitters don't pass through the blood brain barrier But what they do is they work on GI motility, meaning like
Mhm.
moving the gut,
Mhm.
and stimulating what's called the vagus nerve, or supporting vagal nerve tone, because the researchers referred to as poor vagal tone is connected to these gut brain axis issues. So people that have anxiety or depression or brain fog, fatigue, autoimmune conditions, metabolic issues, oftentimes a part of that dysfunction or dysregulation is that a weaker vagal nerve, which is that master regulator of that resting, digesting, gut brain axis stuff, right? So yeah, it is hugely important to support your gut, is to not only support your digestion, but it's just to support many other things in the body, like hormone health, brain health, energy, so many things. So it's hugely important. It's not just about how many times am I going to the bathroom, even though improving digestive health is important too, certainly. And
Yeah.
it's oftentimes a window into other things that may be suboptimal, but it's so much more than that. And that's why Hippocrates said, the father of modern medicine, all disease begins in the gut. And now we have all the research to really show the mechanisms of why he was the father of modern medicine.
Yeah, and look, you are for people who are like, well, how does he really know this? And he's not a registered dietitian or whatever. Here's what I could tell you. Like, there are psychiatrists that have talked about this mind gut connection. I think it's Dr. Drew Ramsey. Is that the one who's written
Yeah.
like books, Eat to
Columbia
Beat
University.
Depression?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Like, this is truth. This is real. Like, sugar is not going to make your gut and your brain happy long term.
Yeah.
Is it good in the moment when you feel like you want some candy? Yeah. But like it's not gonna last. It's all it 80. I don't know. I don't have the right percentage of time it's gonna backfire. But like I know for me, I'm never like joyful really post eating the
Yeah.
candy. But I love the candy because it's meant to make me love it. So talk about the sugar impact because I know I don't know any physician who's like or any doctor who's like, yes, let's have you have extra sugar. Like there's not
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, no. Yeah, this should be, I mean, but there's nothing, look, if you want to have some sugar, have some sugar. But
Yeah.
I want people to have informed consent on this stuff and
Correct.
make a mindful decision about these things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bio individuality with that too. Some people can have small amounts of sugar, moderate amounts of sugar, and they're fine. They feel fine. There's a lot of like thresholds or a carb sweet spot that people have depending on their health profile. What other variables are they going through? So it's certainly not cut and dried as far as that is concerned. But yeah, these are not controversial things that I'm saying. I mean, the vast majority, I mean, on the book itself, it's very well referenced. They talk about all the scientific literature around these topics. And some of the world's most esteemed psychiatrists and psychologists all advocate for my book and wrote blurbs for the book because
Of
it is
course.
so middle ground and like well accepted by most people.
Of
You're never
course.
going to please everybody, but the most well respected people, it is pretty mainstream. So
Yeah.
but yeah, sugar is one of those things that's going to really be disruptive to the gut microbiome. It's going to impact our blood sugar balance. It's really going to cause a cascade of dysregulation in the body. It's just a matter of how much can your body handle without you noticing the effects of it negatively. But these problems exist on a spectrum, and some people can have small amounts of it and they're fine. But
Yeah.
we have to realize how is food impacting my mood?
Right.
And sugar is one of those things that it's what type of sugar too, right?
That's right.
If you're getting like a fruit sugar that's in the fruit with the fiber that's going to blunt that glucose spike, that's going to be metabolized to be treated in the body very differently versus like some sort of high sugar, processed sugar, refined sugar without any fiber. So it's not about broad sweeping statements either. It's like all sugar is bad. It's like, well, how is the sugar being metabolized? And then what's your body's ability to even handle these things?
Yeah, so like having sumo oranges in their full original state is just fine because
Yeah.
it's just an orange. They're so delicious. We have about one more month of them, and then I'm going to be sad.
What type of orange are you talking about?
The sumo citrus.
Oh, I have to try this. I don't know
You're
it.
kidding, right? Oh,
No,
well,
sumo oranges? I haven't had it.
Will, one more month for Sumo Citrus. Go look online, get them to send them to you. They look like a sumo wrestler. They have on the top of the top, they're like a little
Oh, I
gun, like a
have
man
seen
gun.
these. Yes, I haven't tried them, but I've seen
They,
them and yeah.
the brand is Sumo. It's the only, they are like candy. They're not, they're just an orange, but they are as delicious and scrumptious as any artificial sugar that you could possibly get.
Yeah.
Better. better. I find myself when they're in season, I'm happy to have a sumo orange for dessert, happy to have one at breakfast. I love them. It's like a great way to get vitamin C. They're easy to peel. My family calls me an orange peeling ninja because I could just pull it apart real easily because I'm
I feel like I'm
obsessed.
running out of time now because it's
Yeah,
going to be
you
out of
are.
season.
They're only in season January through the end of April. So you
Oh
got to go
man,
get them
to
now.
get
I
on
know
it.
it's quick. They're that good. But I get it. There are different kinds of sugar, and having real, like having sugar that's in a fruit with the fiber, and a vegetable with the fiber. Like beets are a sugary vegetable, but they are a healthy root vegetable because they're a root vegetable. So it's a different kind of impact that the sugar then has.
Yeah. And there's a lot of bioindividuality with something, even with fiber. So, like, one of the things we do with some telehealth patients, not all of them, but when we need to dial this in and get granular, is measuring things via continuous glucose monitor. If somebody
Yep.
has like hangriness
CGM.
or cravings, or they have weight loss resistance or fatigue, sometimes we do have to dial this in, and they may find, okay, even when I have the fiber rich, whatever, maybe it's having too much of that's problematic. So it's
Yeah.
not always like this is good or bad. It's just like what's right for me now. And
Yeah.
then and it's not always about food. Like the stress and sleep,
Oh my
physical
God.
activity also very much influence this.
The CGM is a really cool tool if you can use it in a way that doesn't get you crazy. I've experimented with them and learned a lot, and then ripped the shit off my arm and was like, okay, I'm done. I've had a really good lesson in
Yeah.
this. I'm moving
Yeah. It's
on.
not meant to
I,
be wearing
I
forever.
don't
It's
have
just like a few
diabetes,
weeks.
right?
Yeah. A few
Yeah,
weeks.
no, you have diabetes. I get it. If you don't, just you could do an experiment. And I did. I did like a 2 to 3 week kind of thing, or I did like 10 days or 2 weeks. And I remember I was fascinated by like, and this goes right into your book too, in gut feelings, because you kind of talk about how the body metabolizes things and how like you have to get outside and sun makes an impact on everything and vitamin D. But I had had a day where I was walking all day long outside and had just this really happy day with my family. And on that happy day, we ate pizza and we ate ice cream, real pizza, real ice cream, while walking around outside and having just a lovely day. And my blood sugar never spiked. My blood sugar
Mm.
never went bananas. In the middle of the night, however, on other days when I'm not sleeping well, the spikes were crazy. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, how is it that all day long my blood sugar stays super stable? I mean, it goes up and down in an appropriate manner to
Hmm.
metabolize food, but no crazy. And in the middle of the night, my stress level goes up, my cortisol goes up, whatever it is, pushes it up. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think sometimes you're right. I like keeping things simple. I don't wear CGM as a
Yeah.
general rule,
Yeah.
but I think it's if people are dealing with any things and wanting to see how does stress and sleep and food and physical activity impact their glucose, it's just data. It's really good to be
Yes.
data driven and be your own N of one experiment. And again, it's kind of takes away all the like pontification online and like this is bad, this is good. It's like, okay, what's right for my body?
Yeah.
And instead of like judging somebody else, it's like, no, for yourself, like this is what's right for you. And all of that's going to change over time too. So I have some patients that do it once or twice a year. They'll check in for a few weeks and then kind of see how things have changed. And especially if they're working on things, like if they're working on insulin resistance or working on their gut health or working on
Yeah.
optimizing their sleep, there's a lot more resilience that can be regained as they're supporting these things.
I also really like that this is not a book that's about your weight. This is a
No.
book about your health
Yeah.
and health in mind and body, because you really can't separate them out. I know we want to. I know we want to play this game of I reside in this body and my soul and my spirit are different from a physical house of casing of that is me. It's
Mm-hmm.
you. You're
Mm-hmm.
one, you are you. You are you and your brain and your body.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that, how this is really about being healthy rather than about achieving some sort of aesthetic,
Mm-hmm. Oh
whatever
yeah.
ideal. Yeah.
It's all about how you feel, right? Because like, even if we all ate the same way, like and worked out the same way, we'd all still be different sizes, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's
Yeah.
bio-individuality, like that's okay. It isn't about thinness or vanity. It's about just being the best version of yourself and feeling the best you can feel in the body that you have. So it is that's what it's about. But that's the way that really all that I do in functional medicine is about, because it's really never been about like, okay, be a certain size, or like having the 6-pack ab, or having like that beach body, whatever. It's just not the focus of functional medicine. Is not. Now, there are people that have weight loss resistance that want to overcome them, but even then, whenever we really look and talk to them, it's really empowering them with the fact that, no, this is a check engine light. Maybe that weight loss resistance is a check engine light. Your body's telling you something that is dysregulated or imbalanced or deficient, but they realize, it's like we say all the time, we have to get healthy to lose weight instead of trying to lose weight to get healthy. Like, it'll be a natural byproduct of them dealing with their whatever it is, their insulin resistance or their estrogen increase or their gut health, their inflammation levels. When we calm that stuff down, then they're going to be the best weight for themselves. But they feel great doing it. It's not like this deprivation where they're gritting their teeth just trying to get down like a couple pant sizes.
Yeah, no. It's about getting your body in a state where it wants to work efficiently, and then it does work efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up being as you're supposed to be. That's the goal.
Yeah, and the labs look good too. It's like, it's
Labs have
not.
to look good.
Yeah, the labs look, A1C looks good, glucose looks good, inflammation levels look good, metabolism looks good. That's what this is really about. It's about being healthy inside and out.
Talk to me about social connections and boundaries.
It's huge. And this is like the section in the book about feeding your head and your heart. It's like you could have breakfast, lunch, and dinner down, but the boundaries part, when it comes to your community that you have, or the community you don't have, and your relationship with work too, and many things, can really impact your physiology just as much. So healthy boundaries is a big part of the book, a big part of the protocol, and really people looking at their social connections and how it's impacting their health. And that can look many different ways depending on the person. But I see people that don't have the best social community, and they really I don't want to say toxic friends, but they have stressful relationships in their life that's really impacting their body and their health. And they know it intuitively when you start bringing the research around of how these social connections can influence their biochemistry. And it's just a matter of what can they do. These are not so straightforward, because not everybody can you just leave the relationship. So we talk about things that Eckhart Tolle talks about in his books of, do you have to change, leave, or accept the situation? And I feel like that's a mindfulness practice that I talk about in the book, of people to have to make the decision for themselves. Like, is it something you can change? Is it something you can leave? Or is it something you just have to be in deep, radical acceptance? So these are personal decisions, but I've seen patients make all three of them. I've seen patients get to the point where they have to leave their relationships because they realize it wasn't the food that was making their health so poor. It was their relationships. It was the job that was high pressured. But it's hugely important to our health.
I love change, leave, or accept. It's so true. You have to change the way you respond to it, or change the way you look at it. You have to leave it, or you have to accept that this is how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That is so powerful.
All else is madness, is how
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle says. Yeah.
It's so true, though. I mean, it's so distilling it down to just that, like, makes all the sense in the world when it comes to kind of the dynamics, either in the workplace or in the home life or social life. I appreciate the way you set that up too, because it is true. It's not so easy for everybody to just get out of that thing that they're in that's making them unhappy or might be a toxic environment. Not everybody has the privilege or the liberty to leave a bad work environment. They need their damn job.
Yeah.
So there has to be a way to kind of, within the confines of that, find a way not just to survive it, but to thrive within it. And maybe by changing the way you think, or maybe by doing the other things that you could do to keep yourself in a good head, like eating in a way that supports you, or finding time to be with people that nourish you and fill you up with positivity, so that you can sort of have, in a way, almost like a reserve of something to manage the situation you have to be in.
I see that. Like, you're absolutely right. Most of our telehealth patients have to, at least for a big season of their life, choose the accept decision out of those three, whether
Right.
it's a job or a marriage or
Right.
whatever, a friend group, family members. They can't really
Yeah.
like change or leave it per se, but sometimes they have to do healthy boundaries with that. But for the most part, you're right. It's not like they can just quit their job or whatever
Right.
we're talking about, but it's like, what does radical acceptance actually look like? And that's where you can start really digging into meditation and digging into breath work and digging into foods that love you back, so your resilience can be increased tremendously. And it's not that those things are ever healthy for you, but when you start emptying that bucket with the things you do have some agency over, there's more resilience and wiggle room. So you're not like already at the brink of hitting your tipping point. You have some reserve to handle that stressful situation or that difficult situation.
What's the biggest takeaway you want people to get from reading Gut Feelings?
It's, I think, realizing that there's a science and art to wellness, and
Yeah.
that we cannot separate mental health from physical health, that mental health
Yeah.
is physical health, and that most of these things are completely free, meaning most of the tools in the book are free, especially the feeling stuff, or accessible and really low cost things, practical things. So that's what I really want people to leave with. And as you know, like something that's a mantra at the clinic here is, you can't heal a body you hate, and really shifting our
Oh,
perspective away from
yeah.
like, oh, these are the things you can't do, but really saying, how can I love myself enough to nourish it with things that love me back? Because it's so easy and so vapid and virtue signaling to say, well, there's like, it's body positivity, and but it's another thing to say, really, if I truly respect myself, I want to nourish it with things that love it back on all levels. And that's the true body positivity, in my opinion.
Oh, and I couldn't agree more.
This evolving thing too, which is really beautiful to see. It's like people, I'm repeating myself, but like what serves you today is going to evolve over time. And that's the other thing too,
Yes,
that there should be a grace and a lightness and flexibility to all of this. It's like
there
some
has
people
to be.
stick themselves in such a box and say, well, this is me. Like, I'm keto, I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian, I'm
No,
low
no, no, no,
carb.
no, no.
No,
Yeah,
like, just
no.
what works for you, and let that evolve over time.
You have to listen to your body. So I try to
It's your
do
gut
that.
feelings. It's your gut
Right.
feelings.
That's
Mhm.
right. The book's terrific. You know, you're terrific. How do people go to the clinic in addition to following you online?
Thank you. Everything is at drwillcole.com,
Okay.
drwillcole.com. The
Hmm.
telehealth clinic, we have new telehealth patient options that are open,
Right.
and the podcast. They can just learn everything. There's like
Yeah.
free, low cost, and the telehealth options for people, depending on how you want us to be there for you.
And of course, follow Dr. Will Cole on social media at Dr. Will Cole. Really, I think you're amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. I love watching your whole career sort of expand. Because I know you really care about what you do. And so it's nice to see people paying attention. Thank you for being on my
Thank you, my
podcast.
friend. Thank you again. Just to repeat myself, for your years of friendship, offline and online, I do appreciate it immensely.
Oh my gosh, of course. Please. I'm at Just Jenny Hutt on Instagram, at Jenny Hutt on TikTok and Twitter. And any questions or comments about today's episode, email justjennypod@gmail.com. And I'll be back here per usual tomorrow.